Lacoste sneakers are trash, so we decided to create a banger for them. Well, said like that, it might sound quite pretentious. It might not be a banger, but considering the look of Lacoste sneakers, it's hard to do worse. In reality, most Lacoste sneakers aren't fundamentally ugly, but their problem is they're generic pairs without any flavor that don't stand out at all in terms of design or storytelling like sneaker giants Nike or Adidas can. When Lacoste releases a new model, absolutely no one cares. You wouldn't think so, but I actually have a special fondness for Lacoste as a brand, and we thought it would be fun to try the experiment of creating a pair for Lacoste that could make a real impact in the sneaker game against industry giants who completely dominate the sneaker news. And I admit that it wasn't necessarily easy, but I think we've come up with a concept that could seriously benefit the brand and maybe even put it officially on the sneakers map. You got it. In this video, we're going to present this famous model we've imagined and explain why it has the potential to become a massive banger.
Hello? Hello?
New video. Today we're designing sneakers for Lacoste, and it might seem unlikely, but for those who don't know, we're a big French-speaking sneaker channel that talks about sneakers but also designs sneakers sometimes. Sort of the Seth Fowler of France, even though, well, we're Swiss, not French. But anyway, forget that detail, it might confuse you. I know geography isn't exactly the strong suit of you Americans.
Which country's flag is this?
France?
France has vertical stripes.
By the way, we recently noticed that Seth Fowler is following the channel, so shout out to you, my dude. I hope you like our concept. And for the others, what are you waiting for to follow us too? Creating a pair for Lacoste that could work shouldn't be that much of a problem, considering that we're dealing with a fairly strong brand that everyone respects and likes. At least, that's the perception we have of the brand in Europe. I'm not sure what the Americans think. Probably you prefer its Wish version, aka Ralph Lauren.
You need to leave!
Anyways, ain't all that in the sneaker game, but we're not dealing with Skechers either. A brand that is fundamentally known for being crap and has absolutely no chance with sneakerheads, since even if they were to release the biggest design banger of the century, the appearance of the pair wouldn't be enough to make people forget how bad the brand is. In reality, Lacoste has nothing to envy even from the most prestigious brands like Balenciaga, Louis Vuitton, or Lanvin, which have managed to release several big pairs in recent years. I would even say that, on the contrary, due to its sports-related history, the brand is even more legitimate than all these luxury brands. And yet, the formula doesn't seem to work, even though they've tried. Notably with the L003 active runway, which more or less worked, even though for many, it was perceived as a somewhat messed up mix of an off-white pair and something straight out of AliExpress. The pair isn't a failure by any means. You can feel the tennis world's inspiration, but I'm convinced that there's potential to do even better. Just look at how the luxury brand sneakers designs looked a few years back, and you'll see that even if you start from a distance, if you build something coherent, you can definitely carve out a place in the game. One of the examples that could clearly inspire Lacoste's new sneaker era is what Louis Vuitton did with Virgil Abloh. Louis Vuitton, for a long time, was a brand that aimed to be elitist and did its best to polish its image. It was inconceivable for them to become a brand of the hip-hop world, young, wealthy flexers, and other somewhat vulgar pursuits. And as you can imagine, that seeing Dapper Dan create jackets from Louis Vuitton bags for New York hustlers back in the day wasn't the kind of thing Louis Vuitton wanted to highlight. Yet today, thanks to Virgil Abloh's influence, the most iconic luxury house of all time has finally embraced this part of its history by blending these two worlds that were completely opposite decades ago and are now fundamentally linked through the expansion of luxury streetwear. We see many luxury brands taking iconic sneaker designs that left a mark on the street and reinterpreting them 20 to 40 years later, giving them a completely new meaning. And that's also what we're going to do in this video. At Lacoste, they faced a similar boycott where a part of the brand's consumers were rather looked down upon, and we'll try to pay them a nice tribute by creating a concept around a sneaker model that you know well.
Did you guess it?
For those who don't have the context, in the early 2000s, the Lacoste brand had its image completely tarnished in France by the lower-class kids from underprivileged neighborhoods who all dressed the same way, in Lacoste tracksuits and a pair of TN sneakers. We even saw the term Lacoste TN used to refer to these particular youths who were quickly stigmatized as thugs, and naturally, the Crocodile brand didn't like it at all. Quite the opposite. They did everything they could to prevent them from wearing Lacoste. The Lacoste TN in France is somewhat equivalent to the pimps in New York who wear Louis Vuitton. Ethnic minorities involved in somewhat illegal activities, but who have left a significant mark on popular culture, and have become style references. For those keen enough, you've probably guessed that we're going to create something that Lacoste should have done a while ago. Just like Lanvin is reusing the Osiris D3, and Alexander McQueen is giving us a remake of the Stan Smith, Lacoste is going to get its own version of one of the most popular sneakers in France, the TN, and we're about to make the famous Lacoste TN. The TN is also a pair that we appreciate and know quite well, and we've precisely used the whole background around that pair, as well as the Lacoste brand, to try to create a pair that makes sense, both in terms of design and the story we want to tell. The concept of our pair will be to draw inspiration from the lines of a TN, the heritage of Lacoste, and also the Gorpcore universe, which is popular right now, to create a pair that could make a lot of noise in the French sneaker sphere if it were to be released. And here's what it looks like. We had the basic idea, now we had to turn that into an actual design, and before getting there, we had to sketch several attempts, which weren't really convincing. In the end, this version is the one we chose, and if we compare it to the official TN sketch, you can quickly recognize the inspirations. There are 3 things that we absolutely wanted to keep. The plastic lines all over the pair that define the TN's identity. The silhouette of the sole, even though it's clearly different on our model, it retains more or less the energy of the pair, and that's essential because the sole easily does more than half the job on a pair. And of course, one of the most important elements of a TN that we had to keep, the colorful aspect, that allows you to play with the same color combinations or gradients you can find on a classic Nike TN. Now, a sketch is good, but a somewhat realistic 3D version is always better to explain the details and inspirations around the pair. Our more realistically rendered Lacoste TN looks something like this, and let me explain to you in more detail what you're looking at. The TN was originally a running shoe, and we wanted to retain that very sporty aspect, mainly through the sole, which has lines that invite movement and gel capsules that will remind you of the TN's air bubbles while being totally different in terms of shape, content, and placement. It's a more modern version of the TN's sole, with technologies that seem more advanced, and a design that's more in tune with the times, featuring less repetitive lines and a less organic aspect than the TN's sole. On our model, we have straighter lines that are more reminiscent of architectural elements to enhance the urban aspect of the pair. There's also an asymmetrical aspect, where the inner side is totally different from the outer side. Well, in short, it's less cluttered while having many more elements on the sole. The sole represents the very running shoe aspect, while the upper represents the Gorpcore side, with a very fine and obviously completely waterproof mesh. The logo will simply be printed on the mesh to maintain the concept often found on trail shoes. The interesting part is this piece that divides the pair in 2, created from the lines found in the embroidered Lacoste logos on polo shirts. This piece also allowed us to create a composition that portrays the hidden crocodile in the undergrowth, searching for its next prey in its natural habitat. Seeing his ugly face coming from the pair gives an even more aggressive aspect to the TN. To maintain the idea of moving foliage in front of the crocodile, we decided not to fully attach this piece to the pair, but instead to have zigzag embroideries all around, and to hold the top with the plastic lines, which on the TN are purely aesthetic. Well, on this pair, they mainly serve to properly hold this piece while allowing it to be slightly movable.
Nice.
Throughout the pair, there's this idea of nature, just like the TN, that draws inspiration from the landscapes of Florida and the whales. We are drawing inspiration more from the crocodiles universe and everything related to reptiles in general. You can also see that, for example, the tip of the sole looks like a reptile's tongue. The laces resemble both climbing ropes for the Gorpcore aspect, but also snakes. There's also this idea of reptile skin on the mesh upper, with the play and relief of colors appearing depending on the angle you look at the pair. For the rest of the design, it's purely utilitarian or aesthetic details, like the back that looks like that mainly because we thought it looked dope. Or the tongue, which is bulkier than a TN's, mainly because it also serves as a mini bag, as you can see with the small zipper that allows you to open it and store all sorts of things that TN fans like to have.
If you know, you know.
Well, there you have it, folks. That was our reinterpretation of the TN for Lacoste. It's up to you to let us know if the concept convinced you, and more importantly, if you recognize the DNA of the TN and Lacoste in this pair. The question you're probably asking yourselves is, will this new model actually come to life?
That's a good question.
It's possible that we're working on the pair, but not with Lacoste. We're doing things solo, but I won't say more.
I gotta rush you to the tropics. We're doing all for angels. Only vitamins with them rockets.